Welcome back. You're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Equinix on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Mark Andrus, the Chief Information Officer at the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. Now, Mark, before break, we started our discussion on cloud, and you mentioned this idea of assessments. So let's start there. How are those assessments working? Is this a new process, something NGA has had on for quite a while? And did you borrow it from someone? Did you steal it from someone? Was it something you brought from the Navy? Because I'm starting to hear more, especially on the vendor side, who wants to always talk about, we can provide the assessments, but it's great to hear that you guys are doing it internally too.
Yeah, so it was, they had started it by the time I arrived, so I definitely didn't bring it with me from the Navy. But I think because NGA leaned so far forward on cloud adoption in the early days, they had the ability to really start to catalog their lessons learned and start breaking down what the big cost drivers were. And then they rolled it into a cloud optimization model. So it's literally something where, like we talked about earlier, you come in and you say, I've got this mission I need to perform. Here's the customer base. Here's geographically where they are. Just as a backdrop, we talked about the diversity of NGA's mission, but we didn't talk about the diversity of our landscape. So in terms of how that affects our IT architecture, we got about 50% of NGA's workforce is here in the DC area. About 25% is in the St. Louis area. And then the other 25% is spread all over the world. And it's in various densities, but just imagine wherever there is a national security need, NGA is there supporting the combatant commands, the current operations anywhere. So that drives a data and compute discussion that is very complex. And so, like I talked about earlier, Jason, I talked about a lot of the edge compute. You can see with 25% of your workforce spread all over the world, this isn't just playing around. These are real hardcore needs we have that we're working through and trying to assess how to optimize that.
I can only imagine that when you're trying to reach someone in theater, as you mentioned, whether it's Afghanistan or somewhere else, there is that, I need the data now. I can't wait for latency. I can't worry about, it has to jump through all these hoops to get me the data. There's that real-time need. So where are you with your cloud journey? How much are you into the cloud? A little bit, a lot? Give me a sense of what you can.
So we're a lot. We're a lot, and we'll be more. A lot is it's not an easy number. It's definitely over 50%. But it's as you start to look at it, we talk a lot about hybrid cloud models.
Right.
And it's amazing when you start to unpack that a little bit. It's not like you've got a traditional hardware stack that's now in the cloud. I may have compute on-premise and storage in the cloud, and it may be vice versa. I may have certain aspects of modular compute that is both storage and compute forward, but it may be a small cache that's only periodically updated. So it's an incredibly diverse technical landscape, but in general, well over 50% and seeing that growing.
A lot of CIOs, when I talk to them, they just talk about, the first 4, 5, 6 years as they moved to the cloud was the quote unquote low-hanging fruit. And now, we just saw that the 2020-2021 budget request came out, and there was a whole bunch of details about agency projects and how the CIO risk rating is now a lot more yellow than ever before. And someone told me part of the reason for that was because the complexity of the projects are bigger, meaning that low-hanging fruit of moving email to the cloud or collaboration tools to the cloud is done, and now the complexity is growing. Is that something that you're seeing too, that as we want to move more to the cloud, these programs, these projects are more complex than maybe they were 3, 5, 7 years ago? I know you weren't at NGA then, but your Navy experience, I'm sure, is the same.
I think that's a fair assessment. To give you an idea of the complexity of our operating environment, when I talked about our missions as being both this high-end, top secret stuff, that demands all of that type of capability on the top secret. And then I alluded to humanitarian assistance or disaster relief. So not only do I have to support the top secret environment, I got to get data to the secret environment where the warfighter works, unclassified where the federal agencies may need information, and then what I call the non-classified. So literally when acted upon, when the State Department or another agency goes through the formal request to get that information to support a hurricane or an earthquake, we've got to push data all the way down to that. And that complexity involves cross-domain solutions, which are really interesting when it talks about data, when you talk about data. The other area that I'd like to talk about when talking about cloud is what we've done with these lessons learned. NGA is what's called the sponsor for the current C2S cloud at the secret level. And as a sponsor, what we do is if you are a smaller agency or not even a small agency, take the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, we can sponsor you into this environment. And we've taken everything we've learned and we've created 3 tiers of sponsorship. One of them is, hey, you want to come in and work in the cloud? I'll create an account for you. Number 2 is, hey, do you need some basic security controls? You need some identity and access management framework to work in the cloud? You can use my tools. I've already accredited them. You go to town, you've got your technologists. And the third is full service. So I'm a small agency. I just need to be able to put data and run workloads in the cloud. Can you run the whole security stack for me? NGA's done that for several agencies, and that's a growing area. So as a taxpayer, I was very excited to see that happening, the fact that we're helping each other learn through this journey of cloud adoption.
Do you get a sense of whether a lot of the customers, the partners you have are going that full service versus the basic security controls? Where do they land?
Most of them want the full service.
Yeah.
Most of them, even someone as big as, say, the United States Navy, where I came from. And I think it's smart. Eventually when they go to full-scale adoption, they will leverage their own security services because they have them. But the point is, we talked about user-centric, agile. The point of the cloud opportunity is get in, learn how to use it. Don't be bothered with needing an ATO or setting up a role-based access or whatever. Take what we've got and get going, and then evolve it into your architecture. That's been a huge win for us.
I think that's an important point because I think a lot of times agencies struggle to say, okay, where do we go? How do we do it? Is there a big lesson you'd pull from based on your C2S and other?
Yeah.
What's the big lesson?
So in looking at that, like I said, the things that drive the decision making for us have been cost, number 1, utilization. Okay, and I'll unpack that a little bit later, and then latency. And by latency, I mean the end user. Is it a virtualized desktop? Is it a thick client? How much data are you pulling? And what type of application are you using it for? So when we look at that latency utilization combination, what's really unique for the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, this idea of big data. We don't have just big data in terms of volume. We actually have big data. I mean, it's literally massive file sizes, right? Huge. So what does that do to a pipe when you're trying to push it somewhere? It'll choke it. Right. So when we in particular look at some of the challenges we have, it relates to that compounding effect of large volumes of data with extremely large file size that we've got to move and then figure out how a user optimizes that. So all of that plays into the calculus on where we do what and what form of cloud we use versus on-prem.
As we look forward, as we continue, just finish up our conversation around cloud, and there's plenty of other things to talk about, including data, where are you guys heading over the next 6 or 9 months when it comes to cloud?
When it comes to cloud, well, I think the C2E contract is coming up, and so that's out. So I won't be able to talk about the detail, but really the big talking point around that is a multi-cloud, right? Where we're going is leveraging that multi-cloud environment and figuring how to optimize workloads across a multi-cloud and an on-prem. So that's clearly the road that lies ahead, and there's a bunch of interesting topics to talk about in that.
So there is plenty there. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, again, with other CIOs and other agencies is that understanding of what belongs in the cloud, what doesn't, and when I put something in the cloud, how long does it stay? Is it just because I'm going to have a busy March and then by April, I'm going to bring it back out of the cloud. So that ingress egress stuff too, I think that plays into that optimization piece too. I'm not sure if you guys are experiencing that yet, or is that something that's down the road?
No, we haven't. So we've done a lot of work. The speed of getting in and spinning up a workload in the cloud allows for software development. That you can do a lot of, that kind of decision you're talking about is related more to workloads than data, right? I can do a lot of rapid development, and then I may optimize how that workload is run between on-prem and off-prem based on all those other factors that I've been talking about. But less on, am I going to change? Am I going to move a big chunk of data in or out? No, the general push is to the cloud.
Yeah, excellent. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation. My guest today is Mark Andrus, the Chief Information Officer of the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Equinix on Federal News Network.